Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Boardmasters with me, Chris Mullins, and tonight I am going to be reviewing the Game of Life following on from our playthrough video last weekend, which I will link down below. And as always with these reviews, I'll cover the standard 5 categories, so the art style and theme, component quality, accessibility, replayability, and the overall gameplay. And I will start by colouring this, obviously, as I mentioned in the playthrough video. Game of Life was my absolute favourite game when I was growing up. It was probably this was the one I owned that I adored, and then there was Cluedo, which I played once, fell in love with, but never owned until I was about 30. So this is going to be heavily coloured with nostalgia, so take it with a pinch of salt or however you feel. But let's dive in. So the art style and theme. I really have always liked the art style of the board. I think it is just a really attractive board. And but other than that, there's very little in terms of actual art. There's art on like the career cards and the house cards, which is nice, but that's about it. As for the theme, I'm surprised how much I enjoy a game where the theme is journeying through life, because, you know, a lot of life sucks. It can be. There's some absolutely wonderful moments, but obviously a lot of it is just the boring grind and whatnot. And yet, obviously, they managed to distill that, and they're not going to have you go to work every day and then not have time to play the games that you've bought with the money you've earned. But they have managed to get it into a formula that I enjoy. Obviously, I've always enjoyed just progressing through, particularly the first half of the board, where you're making your decision in terms of, are you going to university, are you starting a career, then you're getting married, then you're buying your house, and there's sort of, unless you're unlucky, you're building your family with the children, and then once you get to sort of around this point, those options start to dry up, and you can have a few ones, but generally that's when the family bit sort of stops and you just sort of having life experiences, which I guess reflects real life, but at the same time it's probably the same with video games, whereas I always like the character creation and then do the first few dungeons and then want to start again and do it with different builds. In that I really enjoy the first half where there's a lot more change and a lot more decisions going on. And whilst it's certainly not a narrative game by any stretch of the imagination, there can be a few little interesting stories that come about because of the theme. Like, for example, in our playthrough video, Stace landed on the square where she had to pay 5,000 to decorate the baby room, but then through the rest of the game she never actually landed on a square that gave her a child. So it's almost like you have to search for the stories, but why couldn't they have kids? They obviously wanted kids. They prepared the room, and then did something tragic happen? Who knows? There's that sort of. If you look for it, there are stories there, and I really enjoy that. Other than that, that's pretty much it for the art style and theme. So let's dive onto the components, and they're okay. Always found these cars that are cute, and you've obviously got the little pegs. Pink and blue pegs for male and female, which I guess is a little out of date now. I don't know if there is a newer version where they've upgraded these to attribute colours to those who aren't of a specific gender, or gender fluid, and be a bit more inclusive in the modern day climate, which I think would be definitely a welcome move. Again, they may have already done that and I'm just not aware of it, but I hope that they have. Other than that, I don't know why, but I've always loved these little 3D pieces of terrain that they have on there. Maybe that's the start of my obsession with minis that has grown over the years, but I just love it when there's a 3D presence to the board. I think it just automatically looks more inviting and more impressive than, say, Monopoly. Obviously, you've got the spinner instead of the die, and again, that's fun. It's not the most reliable. It doesn't really sit in the board as well. It may be my inability to get it in properly, but it's obviously with the die you just roll it, so it's a lot easier, whereas with the spinner, getting it to sit correctly, and then the little flippy bit can get a bit loose, so it doesn't actually get the satisfying clack you want from a spinner. Other than that, it's just standard money and life tokens. It's decent. It doesn't detract it, but that none of the standard bits really add anything either. And that's really it for the components. Onto the accessibility. It's surprisingly a few little tricky elements for children, at least, in terms of the decision making, in terms of going to university or a career, in terms of weighing up the benefits, with a career you start with more money, you don't have the loans to pay back, but you don't get the flexibility in choosing the career, weighed up against the university side where you do get the choice, but you get the debts and you may well have to pay more money out and you don't have the paydays as early. So there's weighing that up. There's obviously home and car insurance, which you can just tell your kids you need those things, ideally just buy them, but the actual understanding why you insure something against the potential of a future disaster is maybe a concept that as a kid they may not be familiar with, and so it could be a bit tricky to get their head round. And sort of similar with the investing of the stocks, so you can pay money to buy a stock so that you earn money every time that number comes up on the spinner. I think it's 50,000 up front, which obviously is a decent amount of money in the game, and some children, and maybe some grown-ups, don't want to be ageist, but typically with children they aren't able to visualize that sort of investment for the potential of reward down the line. They want to know they're going to get their money back as opposed to taking that risk. Other than that, obviously it's a very, very simple game. It is just rolling. There's some choices to make in terms of the careers you choose, because in this version, if someone lands on a square that has a career icon, then they pay that person, which is really thematic and adds to it really nicely, which wasn't in the version that I had as a kid, and I really like the fact that they've integrated the careers throughout the game. But again, that's pretty much the only real decisions you're going to be making, whether or not to buy insurance and when. So accessibility wise, other than that initial couple of decisions, it is very, very easy. It's a very cheap game. I mean, it's 15 to 20 quid. It's widely available throughout retail, obviously. It's one of the games alongside Monopoly people think about when you think about board games, so it's not one that you're going to have difficulty getting hold of. Setup time is quick, other than maybe getting the spinner to sit. Teardown is quick as well, so accessibility is a big win for the game. It's probably why it's been so enduringly popular and has that sort of label as one of the most iconic board games. In terms of replayability, very little, if any at all, because the only real decision that affects the gameplay is that first decision of whether you go career or university. And so there is nothing else really that changes up the game. I mean, obviously if you get a different career and also it's largely dependent on the salaries you draw. If one person draws 100 grand and another person draws 30, unless you get very lucky with a swap salary card space, it's nigh impossible for you to actually play out that game with any sort of chance of winning. It's the 30,000. So it is hugely dependent on that luck aspect, and a lot of people aren't going to like that. It doesn't bother me so much in this, because I found that those sort of discrepancies in salaries are pretty rare, and every time we play it, it's usually within 10-20,000, which is manageable. But that takes us into the gameplay really, and again, as I've said, it's almost entirely luck based. I won the game on the playthrough, and it's almost entirely, well, it is entirely because I got lucky on the spins, although I seem to have to give up huge amounts of money for speeding fines to stay. So I did land on lots and lots of spaces that earned me a lot of money or life tokens, and that's what made the difference in the end. It wasn't any strategic ability on my part, it was just I got lucky with the spinner. And obviously a lot of people are not going to enjoy that. Personally, because the game time is 30 to 40 minutes, probably maximum, I've got no problem with it. I can live with it for a short game like that, and there's fun to be had. But that's pretty much it for everything, really. As I said at the beginning, I do feel a lot better about the negative aspects of this game, probably because it's fueled by nostalgia and I'm wearing a bit of rose tinted glasses, but I definitely think it's a 7 out of 10. I mean, it is a fun game. It's not a game you want to play every week, but when you've got the family together and you want a quick, easy, fun game, then yeah, I would always be happy to play a game of life. But again, that may well be nostalgia fueled. But that's it for my review of Game of Life, really. So thank you very much for watching. Look after yourself, stay safe, and have a good one. Thank you. Bye-bye now.